Tonight on Free Minds TV, Don Lincoln from the New Hampshire Homeschooling Coalition joins the show to talk about a bill that would limit parental control over their children's education in the state of New Hampshire. Also, have you ever accidentally forgotten something under your shopping cart while checking out at the grocery store? We have a story about a man who was arrested for doing just that. We're going to be getting to that and much more when we come back on Free Minds TV. Welcome to Free Minds TV, where we challenge you to think outside the box. I am Toby Islin.
And I'm Nick Michaelevich.
All right, we've got a lot going on tonight. A few minutes ago, Nick was able to sit down and talk to Don Lincoln about homeschooling. Right now, New Hampshire is very good about allowing parentals to have all sorts of rights when it comes to teaching their kids, as they should. It's their kids, their investment. Why shouldn't they have the rights over what they teach them, especially if they're going to be homeschooling them?
Right, and we had a chance to go over that. Right now, there's legislation in the works to make homeschooling more difficult to do, more restrictive. You have to do some reporting ahead of time, and Don and I sat down and we talked about that.
Well, let's take a look at the interview and see what Don had to say.
So I'm here with Don Lincoln to talk about new homeschooling regulations, what they mean for parents who do homeschool, and what they mean for the state overall. So Don, do you just want to introduce yourself a little bit and tell the viewers who you are and a little bit about your background?
Sure, thanks, Nick. Yeah, I'm Dawn Lincoln. I live in Westmoreland, and I homeschool my two daughters, who are almost 14 and 15, and we've homeschooled all along except for 1 year in kindergarten. I'm a representative on the New Hampshire Homeschooling Coalition. I'm not speaking for them tonight, but I am a district rep for them, and I'm also the chairman of the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance.
Okay, now, there were some changes made to homeschooling requirements a few years ago in New Hampshire. I think that was largely thanks to homeschoolers who lobbied for some changes to the laws. What got changed previously that they're now looking to amend?
Right. Well, 3 years ago, a bill was put in that actually I drafted that took out some of the restrictions on homeschoolers. You used to have to submit a curriculum plan every single year that you were homeschooling for every one of your children. And in addition to that, we already had a notification process where every year you had to notify somebody in the education establishment that you were home educating. And at the end of the school year, you had to do some type of an annual evaluation. So what we did was take out the middle part, because if you're already being evaluated and showing that your child is making educational progress commensurate with their age and ability, then how you get there really is a moot point.
Right. So it was basically they just checked for proficiency throughout, when the year was over, and they weren't dictating specifically what you had to teach or saying whether your curriculum was adequate.
Right. You could take some kind of a national standardized test, like we use the CAT test. It's the California Aptitude Test, so it tests you in different reading and math skills, and if your child shows a certain level of proficiency in that, then they're deemed to be, at level. Or you can use a certified evaluator to look at your portfolio of the work that your child's done over the year, and they can get an idea of how they progress from that.
Right. So now that's the system we're currently under. But what are they looking to do now, and with this new legislation? Right.
So what they're trying to do now is put back in what part of what we took out 2 years ago. So 2 years ago, we got rid of the whole curriculum submission portion because it was agreed upon that it was just really an exercise in futility. Parents were doing paperwork and submitting it, and it was getting in a file, and it really had little to no effect on the education the children were receiving. So now what they're doing is trying to put back in a one-time per child curriculum plan. But the worst part about it is that it has to be submitted before you start homeschooling.
So how far ahead of the school year does it have to be submitted?
It doesn't say anything specific. It just says prior to beginning your home education program. So say you've got a child who's in 4th grade right now in a public school, and you're figured that this is just not working for your child at this time, and your best option right now is to take your child out of school to home educate. So you've got to figure out exactly what you're going to be doing while your kid's still in school and you're dealing with the stress and trauma of whatever happens to be going on at the time that's leading you to try homeschooling. In the old law, you had 30 days to do that. So you could start homeschooling, you could talk to homeschooling groups, which there are a number of throughout the state, statewide groups, and then there's all different support groups around the different areas in the state, and all the different parents help each other. You know, we've all been there trying to figure out what are we going to do and what path are we going to take with our home education, and the parents are all more than willing to help out, give you ideas, let you look at your curriculum, talk about the pros and cons of the different things that are available, because there's so much out there. And flexibility is one of the keys of homeschooling. So if you spend too much time making this perfect plan that you're going to submit to the state,
right,
you may find it doesn't work at all for your child, and you're going to throw it away and start something totally different.
Well, every hour you spend on paperwork, you're not educating your child or actually necessarily putting a curriculum together. You're filling out whatever is required
Right.
by the state.
Exactly. You're just exercise in futility. I mean, it's a waste of time for the parents, and it's definitely an intimidation factor, because this is somebody who has never homeschooled before. You need to get all your ducks in order and put your plan forward. And I know one of the sponsors of this bill said, well, if you can't put together a curriculum plan, then how can they possibly think that they can home educate their kids? Well, putting together a good plan doesn't have anything to do with enacting it.
Right. So just because you can write out a plan doesn't mean it's necessarily going to be followed correctly. I mean,
Exactly.
Just because you submit a curriculum doesn't necessarily mean that's what's going to be taught.
Right. And for better or worse on that. And flexibility, again, is key. And having a plan in no way ensures that any kind of education is going to take place. I don't need a plan for education to take place either. My kids, for years, unschooled, and they did what they wanted to do when they wanted to do it, basically. We know there was every now and then there were gentle nudges by mom towards certain things that I really thought were important for them to get involved with, but it was their decision, and education happened without a plan.
And for most homeschoolers, I hear that actually works out better. Children who are homeschooled tend to perform at least as well as public school children.
Generally speaking, you know, that's true. I mean, there are stars in the homeschooling arena, and there's also a lot of special need type children who are being homeschooled because their needs can get better met at home. And we've got lots of good old average kids in the mix too.
So it's pretty representative of any educational population. I mean, you've got people who are overachievers, people who have special needs, and people who are just in the middle somewhere.
Definitely. Yep. We've got all representations there. And I also think that there's a discriminatory portion to this statute that they're trying to enact. The law is going to call for you to have to submit this curriculum plan that has 13 subject areas, which are all the things that are included in what's considered to be an adequate education. And that adequate education is supposed to take place over 13 years. They've got the kids from kindergarten through senior year in high school at 13 years. So these 13 subjects, if you're starting to homeschool, you're supposed to provide information on how you're going to educate them in all those subject areas.
Through the full run of the education? Or?
You know, it doesn't really tell you exactly for what time period. It's kind of assumed that it's an annual plan, but it doesn't really say. So that leaves a lot of leeway for somebody to say this is not sufficient or it is sufficient, although there's no mechanism for there to tell you that it's not sufficient anyways. The superintendent, or if you file with a private school, which is what I do, they should just accept it and put it in a file. And if that's all they're doing with it, then what's the point? It's really silly then.
Yeah.
And it really has nothing to do with what the child's going to accomplish or not.
Just seems onerous. Now, what can be done as far as contacting representatives? I understand this bill has passed the Senate, but it still has to go to the House. Is there anything else that can be done besides contacting just your representatives? Or?
Yes. April 15th at 10 o'clock, anyone who's interested in this bill should show up at the State House. We are having the second part of the hearing on this bill because we had over 200 people show up to testify about the bill on April 2nd. It took way too long because they let the sponsors go and the people from the Department of Education and the Superintendent Association, and by the time they got to the homeschoolers, they had another hearing to go to, pretty much. I think about 3 homeschoolers got to speak. So they recessed it and are starting again on April 15th, 10 o'clock. It's going to be in Representatives Hall because they expect another big crowd. So, you know, I fully encourage anybody who has an interest to please come down to the State House that day and be heard.
Absolutely. The more people, the better.
Definitely.
Well, all right. Thanks for talking with us tonight, Doc.
Thanks so much.
All right, so it looks like it's kind of important to stop this legislation. It should be a parent's right to choose what they teach their education. And why is it any of the state's business?
Well, and exactly. And currently the state still makes parents, or students, I should say, take proficiency tests when they're in the school year to show that, yes, you did teach your child what they need to learn, reading, writing, arithmetic. That's already provided for. It's not like there's no testing. This new requirement just makes it so that there's advanced reporting, and that probably will intimidate a lot of parents. It's just creating more paperwork and making it more difficult to take your child out of public school and homeschool them if you want to.
As if it's not already hard enough for parents to homeschool their children and take the time out of working. It's pretty much a full-time job to homeschool your kid. If that's already not enough work, now we're throwing up more roadblocks for parents. And parents who are homeschooling their kids, for the most part, care more than any other parents. The parents who homeschool their kids care about their education so much that they're willing to make it their full-time job to educate their kids. The state doesn't need to get involved here. For the most part, they're doing a fine job. So it's just ridiculous. The state needs to butt out. If you want your opinion to be heard on this, contact your representatives about it. In my opinion, it's important to let your voice be heard. Let the reps in New Hampshire or wherever you are in the country, let them know your opinion because they supposedly represent you. All right, Nick, speaking of letting your representatives know if you're upset about something or if you don't want or you want certain legislation passed, what's going on in Downsizer DC land?
Well, this week's Downsizer Dispatch, we're talking about Downsize DC's I'm Not Afraid campaign. And what this is it deals with the war on terror. The government releases a lot of information. They really try to make terrorism sound like more of a threat than it really is. Your odds of being killed or injured in a terrorist attack are far smaller than having a household accident. Many other things that are kind of oddball things are still a lot more likely to kill you than terrorism. But we trade off a lot of our liberties in this war on terror to supposedly keep us safe. Whereas we don't do that for anything else. We don't do that for car accidents. We don't turn in our cars. And just as one example of a new level of stupidity in the war on terror, fishermen on Lake Erie, even ones who don't intend to cross the boundary into Canada, are now required to have a passport with a photo if they're out on the lake, just in case they cross the boundary. And when they come back ashore, even if they stayed in the United States, they're required to have their photo taken at a government office just because they were on the lake. And this is, if you want to go fishing on Lake Erie, you need to check in, even if you haven't crossed an international boundary. It's really unnecessary. And there's a way you can contact your representatives. Go to downsizedc.org. I encourage you to sign up for the Downsizer Dispatch because it keeps you updated on all kinds of things the government's trying to do while you're not looking. But for this campaign, go to downsizedc.org, and you can send your representatives with, a statement saying that you're not really that afraid of terrorism, that we do need to fight it, but we should do it in a way that respects the rule of law and our civil liberties, and that we don't need to be scared and trade away our freedoms just to supposedly keep us free. Doesn't make much sense. So I would go to downsizedc.org. I think it's important to let representatives know that we care just as much about liberty as we do about being safe.
Well, let your representatives know your voice. Let your voice be heard is probably about the easiest way to get in touch with those crazy people in Washington, usually not representing the true beliefs of Americans, but let them know your beliefs anyways. Okay, when we get back, we're going to be getting into some bad news that happened right here in the area about a school vote in New Hampshire, in Marlborough, New Hampshire, as well as a man who was arrested for forgetting something under his grocery cart. I know I've done this, but I wasn't arrested for it. We'll be getting to that and much more when we come back right after this.
Log on to freemindstv.com for archives of the show,
the Free Minds Radio podcasts,
show content and the forum,
ways to donate,
the members section,
contact info, and a whole lot more, all at freemindstv.com.
Welcome back to Free Minds TV, where we challenge you, the viewer, or listener if it's the podcast, to think outside the box. I am Toby.
And I'm Nick.
Okay, we've been covering this Marlborough school issue for well over a year now. In Marlborough, New Hampshire, which is right out of Keene, New Hampshire, where we broadcast from at Cheshire TV, there's been a vote to try to get a new school. The people over there who are sending their kids to school say, we need a new school, this one's no good, we need $11 million, an $11 million bond paid for by the taxpayers to build a brand shiny new school, because it would look nice and all that great stuff, right? Well, they voted and failed to get the 2/3 majority needed 8 times. But each and every one of those 8 times, they said, come back in a month because we're going to re-vote on this. So everyone who voted no on it has to come out every time. And gradually, people get sick of coming out. They're saying, what's the point? They're going to keep doing this until it goes through. These people who don't want to pay for their kids' education themselves, they want their neighbors to pay for it for them, they're going to keep hammering away at it because they can see the poor old people can't come to the vote every time. The people who are on fixed incomes that would be voting against this can't come out every time. So they managed to hammer this through, and last night, or a couple nights ago, they won. And by a small majority, less than 1%, they got the bond measure passed to build this new school. Now, all 8 of the prior attempts, they got to re-vote on the issue a month later. Well, this time, it's all done and said because they got what they wanted. So all the people don't get to have a second chance to speak on this like they did the 8 other times. Is this fair, Nick?
No, it's not fair. It's really what they're doing is voting to take money away from people who can't afford to spare that money in many cases, their neighbors. They're voting to essentially force them to pay or lose their home for a new school that you can question whether or not it's really necessary.
You know, I got a phone call from someone who lives in Marlborough. I wasn't able to go out there. I don't live in Marlborough, so I wasn't at this particular vote and hearing and such. But they said that the polls were only open for an hour. An hour on something that's going to affect thousands of people. Not only that, but it only lost by a small percent, like less than 1%. And this is going to make people lose their homes. I've gotten phone calls from people who say, if this goes through, I'm out of a home because I'm an old person on a fixed income. So congratulations. You people who voted in favor of this are stealing from your neighbors. Now, I'm not a religious person, but I know that one of the 10 commandments is thou shalt not steal. And that's what you're doing. You're stealing your neighbors' homes. You're stealing from people who can't afford this. I hope you sleep well tonight. Because some people, soon they won't have a bed to sleep on. Because you took it from them. You're greedy. You're selfish. I have nothing else to say. What am I going to do? Alienate 450 people who don't want to pay for their own kids' educations? I'm sorry, but get it together. Think of your neighbor, not only yourself. Pay for your own kids' education. This isn't welfare for the middle class. Steal from your old neighbor so that your kid can go to fancier, shinier school. It doesn't take bricks and mortars to educate a child. I don't know what to say. It takes a school to bankrupt a neighborhood.
Yeah, and it's going to do a good job of that, unfortunately.
Yeah, I've heard from people who said they're not going to be able to live in their homes anymore. So I hope these people, these less than 500 people, feel happy about what they've done. Because it's not good for the town of Marlborough. Maybe it'll be good for some of the families who can buy that extra car so that they can have this welfare for the middle class. Good. I'm glad. Buy that extra car. Watch the old person get kicked out of their house. Great.
Yeah, I mean, that's really what it does, and people don't think about it in that way.
It's so sad.
But you're forcing people to pay, and that is stealing.
And when people are on fixed incomes, especially in this time where the economy is suffering, what are you going to do? It's very sad. And it should be noted also, some of the people didn't like that you needed a 2/3 majority to get this passed through. You needed 67% of the vote to get this passed through. Well, Molly Kelly from Keene, New Hampshire, disagreed with her on the past, and I disagree with her on this. She wants to reduce the threshold to only 60%, so it would be easier to have tyranny of the majority. Good for you, Molly. Good for you.
Yeah, well...
These people make me sick. I'm sorry, but when you're stealing from your friends, when you're stealing from your neighbor, when you're saying, you know what, my new car so that I don't have to pay for my kids' education is more important than you living in your home, that makes me sick. It makes me disgusted for these people. Do they know they're doing this, Nick? Do they know that they're stealing from their friends and family?
I don't think that many people think about it that way, but if you actually sit down and think about the mechanics of it, you're essentially having the town do the stealing for you. You're asking somebody to take people's money forcibly, and that is stealing. I don't know how else you can put that. And It looks like people like Molly Kelly, number one, they don't respect limited government enough, and number two, it's really just that it's too hard for them to take from old people and people on fixed incomes under a 66% threshold, that now they only want it to be 60%. They just want to make it easier to get their way.
Well, I don't know. If you want to vote against, let your senators and representatives know. It's House Bill 479, which would change this. So contact Molly Kelly. Let her know that you're as disgusted as me. So I don't know. Maybe we can do something. Maybe we can't. Now, just for people who are like, well, it's not stealing from a neighbor. What are you talking about? This is the government. It's not stealing. Well, if I came to your house with a gun and said, you know, my kid needs a better school to live in, and I'm going to go around and collect the money, give me $100, would that be stealing?
That would.
If I got 10 of my friends to come and do it with me, went to your house, hey, my kid needs an education and these 10 people are here to back me up, give me $100, would that be stealing?
Yep.
What about 100 of my friends?
Still stealing.
What about less than 500 of my friends? Because that's what this passed by.
Right. I just don't think people think about it in that way, but that's essentially what you're doing.
9 votes. 9 votes passed this through. So
I mean,
9 of my friends come to your house and put a gun to your head. Can I have 100? Can I have my $100 to educate my kid?
Well, it's because it's done through the government, and there's that air of legitimacy there that says that, oh, well, if we're doing it through a vote and 2/3 of people agree to steal what you own, then that's okay because it's done through the town of Marlborough. It's not just a few hundred people getting together.
They feel like they're not doing it.
But they wouldn't do it on their own.
No.
I'm convinced that they wouldn't.
Most people are good
take
people. Most people don't want to steal from their neighbors. Most people are good people, but we live in this system which makes it so easy, which makes it seem like not stealing. All right, we've run a little bit long on this topic, but the next one's a short one. Just wanted to share it with some of the viewers. Have any of you ever forgotten an item under your shopping cart while you're checking out at the grocery store? I know I have before, and I actually turned around. It was last time I did it. It was some toilet paper, and I turned around and I went back and paid for it. But what if I didn't have the opportunity to do that? Well, that happened to Tom Sturgis, a long receipt showing $157.20 worth of groceries in 2 separate shopping carts was pulling out of a Brooklyn supermarket on Saturday night. After going through the self-checkout machine where you check yourself out, a police officer who was guarding the door stopped him and subsequently arrested him, leaving all his groceries in the store. Subsequently arrested him, handcuffed him, and walked him out of the store, put him in the cruiser, and drove him to the police station, charging him with theft. He told the police it was an accident. I'm sorry, I'll go back and pay for it. You can see I have well over $100 worth of stuff. This is a simple mistake. I'm sorry it slipped my mind. No, tough luck.
It's easy to do, especially with those self-checkout machines. If you miss one item, which is what this guy did, he missed like $4 worth of ginger ale.
It was less than $4 worth of soda.
Right.
I forgot.
So, you know, I really doubt he was trying to steal it. It's $4. I mean, oops, I missed it. It's easy to do with self-checkouts especially. And what happens if you're walking through and somebody's actually checking you out and scanning you out and they miss an item so it doesn't end up on your receipt?
Is that their fault? Do they get arrested then for helping you steal? I don't know. It seems ridiculous. If I was a manager of the store, I'd say, "What? The guy bought over $100 worth of stuff. $4, that's like a coupon. I'm still making money here. I mean, we don't really need to arrest him." And he was in jail from 11:30 p.m. until 3 a.m. I mean, that's hours in jail for this, and now he's going to have a record, of course, and great. I'm sure his life is going to be better for this. He learned his lesson, probably. Learned his lesson probably not to trust certain police officers is probably more like what he learned.
Yeah, and he was paying it back at essentially $1 an hour if he was in jail for about 4 hours. Is his time only worth $1 an hour? Even if you were saying he intended to steal it, that's what it equals out to. I think sitting in jail is worth more than $1 an hour.
All right, when we come back, we've got more. We're going to be getting into the inbox where we listen to what you guys have to say and more right after this.
Hey, Ridley here from RidleyReport.com. Just wanted to urge Monadnock area viewers, please take Free Minds TV in moderation. You don't want your head to get loose and go floating around. Also, when you get to the courthouse for jury duty, please don't let the judge trick you. Don't ruin people's lives without good cause. You have the right and the duty to acquit any accused lawbreaker if you dislike the law. Visit FIJA.org to learn more.
Welcome back to Free Minds TV, where we challenge you, the viewer, to think outside the box. I am Toby.
And I'm Nick.
Nick's over there. He's not in the shop. All right, Nick. I ran over on my articles from earlier in the show, so I'm gonna let you take the lead here and give me an article that I haven't seen yet. What's on your mind tonight, Nick?
Well, food prices actually, not just here in the States. We've talked about how when you go to the grocery store, the slipping dollar
Yep.
and the rising cost of commodities are really pushing up food prices, not to mention the ethanol program, which has really put more of a strain on the food supply than it's worth.
Right.
But it's starting to affect the whole world. This is a global economy. It's a global it's not exactly a shortage of food, but food is too expensive, especially for people who live in less developed countries. There have been food riots in Africa, and now there are angry mobs in Haiti. They attempted to storm the presidential palace in the capital and were dispersed by UN peacekeepers. But many people in Haiti are living on only $1 US a day. And between the dollar slide, the war in Iraq driving up the cost of oil, and commodity prices rising in response to the fall of not just the US dollar, but some other worldwide currencies, we're seeing this really start to affect people who are right on the edge of survival. And it's unfortunate. I think it has a lot to do with American foreign policy and our monetary policy, and it's starting to affect the whole world. I mean, they're all tied to our dollar. And when our dollar does poorly, the rest of the world suffers as well. Mm-hmm. So we need sound money to correct this problem, and we need a more sane foreign policy, because largely the war in the Middle East is what has driven these food prices so high. I mean, that's part of it. Transportation prices are higher. So people need to eat, and I think we need to make some changes, or we're going to run into some rough times throughout the world, and that's going to make the changes for us. It'd be a lot better to do it as a conscious transition.
Sounds like common sense to me. I'd also suggest investing in other ways to fuel the traveling of the gas prices is also helping to fuel this whole situation we're in as well. All right, well, it's getting to that point in the show where we want to hear from you. Let us know how you think. You can leave us a message on our voicemail at 206-350-0123, or you can send us an email, fmtv@freemindstv.com. It's time to listen to what you guys have to say with this week's Inbox. I watch you guys online, and I must say, you are all a breath of fresh air. To hear others speak the language of liberty rather than government intervention gives me hope. Thanks, you all rock. Holy crap, I wish I was at that party. Those cops would have known where they could shove those breath tests. Know your rights. Great show as usual. This speaking of a story we did last year where at a root beer kegger, kids had to take breathalyzer tests. Not a drop of alcohol found, but the cops made every kid take those breathalyzer tests. So, know your rights. The cops didn't have the rights to do that, but the kids didn't know their rights, so they had to take all the breathalyzer tests. Next one. Wow, I'm a celebrity now, having to do with an email we read of his last episode. I really need to change my account name. Alden is a character in a book I'm writing. Try and guess what happens to him. From what I've seen, small business can be very resilient to state abuse, but they also don't fight back as much as they should. They're survivors, not fighters. Poor bar owners. Time for them to disobey. Keep the doors open and pay the state nothing at all. So this both those last comments having to do with an article we read about last week where the state of New Hampshire is trying to up the fees and the licenses to own a bar from $1,200 to as much as $24,000. This would put many small bar businesses out of business, small bars out of businesses, while creating state protection for the bigger ones, the ones who are backing and supporting this bill. If you'd like to let us know how you think, give us your opinion, send us an email, fmtv@freemindstv.com. You can also leave us a message on our talkback line, 206-350-0123. All right, well, we're just about out of time today. We'd love to invite you onto our website, freemindstv.com. From there, we have the Free Minds TV radio. We do a radio show as well in podcast form. Subscribe to us via iTunes. Also, maybe vote for our podcast, vote.freemindstv.com. Also like to give a little plug to our members section. If you like Free Minds TV, you don't think you're getting enough, well, we have a member section. It's only $3 a month or $30 a year. You get bonus interviews, bonus segments, bonus radio podcasts, and all the old archives. I think 1 through 40 are posted up there. More being added every week. It's the Free Minds TV member section. If you'd like to view any of our show content, it's all at forum.freemindstv.com. Join the community, join the discussion, join the fun. It has been Toby here with you.
And Nick.
We'll be back with an all-new TV episode next week. Join us this Sunday for our Free Minds TV radio. Thanks a lot. Have a great night.